Good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Woodbury County Zoning Commission. Today's date is February 27th, 2023, and time is 6 o'clock. Tonight's meeting will be audio taped and minutes will be prepared. In respect to all parties, we ask that those present turn off cell phones or set to vibrate. Those in attendance are asked to legibly complete the attendance sheet upon the front table. I would like to take a moment to review the procedures that the commission will follow tonight. First, the commission will handle the normal housekeeping agenda items. Then for each application on the agenda, I will open the public hearing on the item. Planning and zoning staff will then present the staff report, including the staff recommendations. Any letters or other communication received from the public prior to the hearing will be entered into record. The applicant will then have the opportunity to present his or her case and respond to the staff report. Next, we will hear comments from the public. If you would like to speak in either support of or against the application, you must come to the microphone. Please first state your name, address for the record. All interested parties shall be heard, but repetitious comments should be avoided. Repetitious or irrelevant comments may be ruled out of order by the chair. I ask that you remain respectful and courteous with your comments at all times. After all public comments have been heard, the staff and applicant may make a closing statement. The hearing shall then be closed by motion and vote. Thereafter, no further comments from the staff, public, or applicant may be heard unless asked for by the commission. The commission shall then deliberate the case and may ask questions from the applicant, the staff, or any party offering testimony. However, such questions do not reopen the hearing for additional comments from the public unless so requested or approved by the commission. The commission will then formulate and vote on a motion. The motion will typically either grant or deny the requested application. Any commission member who has ex parte communication to place in the record of this meeting should do so prior to the beginning of the deliberation of the respective agenda item. Go ahead and call to order. Roll call, we have members of the commission, Jeff O'Toole, Corey Meister, myself, Tom Bride, and nobody else is coming.
We've got 3 members present and then the 2 absent.
We'll move on to public comment on matters not on the agenda. Seeing none, move on to the items of business. First item of business, election of the chair of, sorry, skip that. Approval of the minutes from the November 28th meeting of 2022. I have a motion by Jeff, second by Corey. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same. Hearing none, motion carries. Now we'll move on to the items of business. Election of the chair of the zoning commission for 2023. And members not present can still be nominated.
I would nominate Chris.
We have a nomination for Chris by Jeff, a second by Corey. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same. Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to the election of the vice chair of the zoning commission for 2023.
I'll second that. If you're willing.
Yeah, that's fine. So we have a motion by Jeff, second by Corey. All those in favor say aye.
I motion.
Oh, sorry. Easy. Before I added it, motion by Corey, second by Jeff. Sorry, Don. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. So now we'll move on to the public hearing. We have to hear the staff report. Dan?
Okay, yes, this public hearing, these next 2 public hearings are concurrent applications. One is a rezone and the other is a minor subdivision. So I'll go ahead and read this into the record. Dolph Eivner, who is here tonight on behalf of the Maxey's Family Farm LLC and the Brian and Bonnie Eivner Trust, have filed for a 6-lot minor subdivision on the property identified as parcel number 87470430003. The subdivision proposal is being presented as referenced before with a zoning ordinance map amendment rezone from the agricultural preservation zoning district to the agricultural estates zoning district to account for more density within the 40. Both proposals have been noticed in Sioux City Journal's legal section on February 11, 2023. The neighbors within 1,000 feet have been duly notified via February 10, 2023 letter about tonight's February 27th zoning commission public hearing. The appropriate stakeholders, including government agencies, utilities, and organizations, have been notified and have been requested to comment. The Woodbury County engineer found the proposal in compliance with Iowa code closure requirements and found that the lots have adequate access. The county engineer did find a typo on the plat that he had referenced in there about 200 feet on the lot that abutted 230th and Barker, and that was corrected, and it was highlighted on the plat, but it's corrected in the record, and the surveyor addressed that, so that is in order. Extraterritorial review as required by Iowa Code 354-9 was waived by the city of Sergeant Bluff with the adoption of City Council Resolution 23-1 on January 10th, 2023. A small portion of the property that is not in any buildable area is located in the special flood hazard area, Zone A floodplain. Based upon the information received and the requirements set forth in the zoning and subdivision ordinance, the proposal meets the appropriate criteria for approval. It is the recommendation of staff to approve this proposal with the condition that the property owners sign pavement agreements for any future paving for Barker Avenue and 230th Street. A copy of the pavement agreement was included in the packet. We did include an updated version. The county attorney's office looked on it, and definitions on frontage was added to the agreement, as well as an additional signature plate. So that was included in the extra materials here tonight for you. So based upon everything, the staff would recommend it contingent on the pavement agreements being signed and executed at the recording.
Thanks, Dan. Do you have anybody from the public to speak on behalf of it?
Yes, my name is Philip Leitner. I live at 3400 subdivision. We're putting this one in. I put in another subdivision to the north. This one in. This also has something to do with the cover pipeline. That's part of the reason for this.
So it'll be this property.
They moved it. It will affect maybe one lot. So now I kind of had to do this to get it to clean it up. So, and it's okay because subdivision is neighbors all around it. Be a good spot. And I still have 2 lots on the. I sold 2 lots and I put it back to you.
From the one from last year.
I figured I better do it now. Pipeline, because otherwise they wouldn't agree to. But they just want to straighten agriculture. That was maybe jump forward, perhaps.
That makes sense.
And I'm perfectly happy to sign the paving agreement. It's also all. And to be like from the homeowners lots, no, anything at all. One question I say. They were a little nervous in the beginning, but I just explained, you're going to build a $600,000 house. If they, you better hope they, I mean, you know, paving everything.
I see Siouxland District Health had responded regarding the issue. And I'm assuming that's something you're aware of. That
Well, in regards to the floodplain,
Yeah.
In your packet, if we go to page 32, you will see page 32, and I'll bring it up here on the board too. 32 defines the current floodplain. And the way that is in the northeast, it's very little effect on where the lots are because the lots are cut in here. So we had to require them to go get a base flood elevation number from the DNR and include it as part of this proposal. But looking at the future draft map, that's what happens. Floodplain goes away. So the floodplain now is kind of projected by the federal government has kind of been delayed on it. It looks like June or July of 24 now. So ultimately, the mapping looks better for them in the long run. So that little area is going out eventually if all stars align.
Right, that's currently the way it is. It's a little bit of an issue, or it could be an issue.
Well, if we factor in the rear setback being typically in the AE, it's 50. And the 100, you're likely not going to be in a floodplain issue. So if they come for a building permit and they show me that they're not in that floodplain zone where they're right here ahead of it, that means they're flat not in the floodplain. So
Still, and there's still adequate ground even currently to
Yeah.
put in the septic and meet the
yeah,
septic.
as for Ivy is saying that if it came in an event where they had to find room, put it in the floodplain, they'd have to get a floodplain development permit, which is very common. And they just add on some floodproofing procedures that Ivy runs through. It's a much more expensive system, but typically their office will try to work with them on appropriate placement. So that information would be available to them when they take out the floodplain, or excuse me, the building permits and everything.
And more than likely, it won't even be an issue, but if it were, it's still possibly it's a buildable lot.
Yeah, as far as where the house is, we could grant a building permit within the setback footprint. It's just that it goes over to the health department and then they would make a determination on where the well and the septic would be. So they have to deal with their own setbacks and how far the well has to be from the septic. So with that being the base 2-acre lot, they would just have to make a determination based on the footprint. So it seems like there's room to work, but there's still always that possibility where they'd have to get a floodplain development permit.
Questions?
I had that same
No.
framework down.
Nobody else, any further questions? Anybody else with any comments regarding the issue? Or you can go ahead and motion to.
Motion to close.
You could probably check on, let's see, that one.
Okay, yeah, I guess sorry, I skipped over that one or missed the issue with the taxes. Are you aware of that?
Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
And when the treasurer, just for a full record, when the treasurer mentions that, they won't record the plat until they're paid. So that's kind of the check that we always put that into the report and notify the property owners.
We can still go forward.
Yeah.
without-
It's just the plat can't be executed until taxes are good on the existing parcel.
You're aware of that. Okay. Great, now I guess we'll motion to close the public hearing.
Yeah.
Entertain it, Jeff, motion to close, Cory, a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same, hearing none, motion carries. Comments or discussion from the commission?
Two things.
All right, I'll slow down, let you handle. Okay, if there's none, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make them. Find what it said here. Motion to recommend the approval of the Barker addition to the Board of Supervisors with the condition the property owner sign pavement agreements for any future grading and hard surfacing and pavement along Barker Avenue and 230th Street.
Okay, we have a motion from Jeff. Second by Cory. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same. Hearing none. Motion carries. Moving on to public hearing for zoning ordinance map amendment to rezone from ag preservation to ag estates. Yeah.
Okay, this is concerning the same parcel. Again, Del Eivner on behalf of the Maxey Family Farm LLC and the Brian and Bonnie Eivner Trust has filed an application for the zoning ordinance map amendment rezone on the property identified as parcel number 8747043000003 from the agricultural preservation to the agricultural estate zoning district for the purpose of facilitating the subdivision for the 6 residential lots through the concurrent minor subdivision application. The proposal has been properly noticed in the Sioux City Journal's legal section, February 11th, 2023. The neighbors within 1,000 feet have been duly notified via February 10th, 2023 letter about tonight's February 27th, 2023 zoning commission public hearing and have been requested to comment. As of the printing of the packet, February 22nd, 2023, no comments or inquiries have been received about the proposal. Appropriate stakeholders, including government agencies, utilities, organizations, have been notified and have been requested to comment. No objections were received from the stakeholders. A small portion of the property is not in any buildable area, is located in the special flood hazard area floodplain. Based on the information received and the requirements set forth in the zoning and subdivision ordinance, the proposal meets appropriate criteria for approval. It is the recommendation of staff to approve the.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Moving on, anybody to speak on behalf of that rezone?
Same thing you said before.
Okay. Right,
Second that.
motion by Corey, second by Jim to close. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, same. Hearing none, motion carries. I guess, one thing I would point out or bring up at this point is the future land use map is in conjunction with this type of development in that area. Going to Ag Estates, it fits in its surrounding properties close by, proximity wise.
Yes, page 43, kind of in the staff analysis, did reference the general plan's goals, the residential goals, 5152 land use goal. And of course, we've kind of got the rural residential, which has been typically used as the criteria for. Typically, we use the 2-acre lots much more in these type of districts versus like a suburban residential. So this typically fits with the nature of the area. As Dolph had mentioned, his new subdivision kind of to the north, it's kind of in the same boat as what that one was. On top of it, there were some already AE lots there within the neighborhood. So it's not a major shock, but right up here, we've got some AE here, we've got some AE here. And I know that this image doesn't show up, but you get your 220th up here that has kind of a mix of both the AE and the SR. And of course, Sergeant Bluff. And Sergeant Bluff, I can't speak for them, but they ended up waiving it. They were fine under, I should say, with the subdivision proposal. They would probably not waive these. And again, I can't speak for them if they're abutting or very much closer to where the city may be expanding kind of in the long term. But based on their action on this one, they were comfortable enough with our subdivision proposal here at the county level.
Okay.
The- Talks about the CSR rating and how much impact does that have? I mean, it's over, CSR is over 65 and it's 66. How much impact does that have on the recommendation for staff?
Well, it's, staff looks at it, of course, when you value farmlands, the agricultural preservation is designed, when you have a crop rating that is significant, that's an indicator that it's very useful farm ground. And it's kind of an awareness mechanism on, positions on where you're going to develop and urban sprawl, the cities expand. And we know since the beginning of time, cities have expanded into farm ground a lot of times, or from farm ground, with the help of counties in particular, when these particular lots have been created. So staff looks at the function of what the design and the ordinance is of AP in terms of the density in AE. AE keeps some agricultural characteristics, but you can't run a farm on a 2-acre lot, obviously. But you can definitely have some characteristics out there. Having the rural life, the rural county living is kind of a big part. And when a landowner comes with a reasonable proposal that can meet the majority of the requirements, where it's near a city, it's complementary to the general plan in terms of a layout. I think the biggest deal breaker would be is if this was suited directly for farm ground. Then the recommendation by staff would go the other way if it was in the county's general plan to say that this will remain farm ground. And that's where I can't emphasize enough that the county development plan, when those go through the process, are essential. That's where the whole basis of everything that we think about is put into place for these types of decisions here. And so I would look at mapping, I would look at the multiple prong criteria, and of course, report that for the suitable rating. That's a very decent rating. And a lot of times that these property owners that do propose that, that's the particular farm ground that they're willing to give up basically for that particular development purpose. Much of the time, the assessor will report the crop suitable rating a lot of times by the 40. We all know that they can kind of ebb and flow when you put the map out, where the soil content can change quite a bit. And we know that farmers are very brilliant when it comes to the areas within the farm ground that are most productive to them. When they make these decisions later on to split off an area that is not as productive. So I would have to say that that's definitely a criteria that's important. And I think the farmers naturally know that, and they look into that based upon their years of yield and everything from that perspective. So our zoning ordinance and our general plan make this best possible. And so staff is comfortable with the recommendation.
Well, I guess I'd like to add to, along with that is with the future land use map, they've targeted areas that are going to develop, and they understand that there's going to be development taking place in those corridors where it's near the city. If you do take farm ground, you use that up in those areas instead of going out in the middle of a beautiful piece of ground 8 miles out with nothing around and doing a subdivision. So I think that's part of what we've always looked at and really has been a issue, is if somebody was going to do this in the middle of a section of ground 7 miles from town.
Yeah,
Not in an area to be developed.
absolutely. And I think we're seeing more common today, probably because of banking, the splitting the house off of the farm has become more prominent. And we've ran into scenarios where we're typically doing 1 lot or 2 lot subdivisions, just because a farmer has taken advantage of the freebie split. Basically, if they've had a clean 40, the next split would take a subdivision. So kind of the easiest way to kind of think about it is you have a clean 40. It's very clean in terms of the elevation and everything. There's an old farmhouse on it, and they simply want to keep farming, but they want to take the house off. The next split would run us into the subdivision, and then hence another house. And so then you're allowed, based on the AP density, you're allowed 2 houses in a 40. However, farmers can be ag exempt. Now, under the ag exemption means that if you're supporting a farming operation, farm family has multiple family members that live out there, the farmhouse can be construed as an aspect of running the farm, supporting the farm. And so that density requirement is waived because the farmer holds the ag exemption. And the ag exemption is actually an exemption from zoning, and the zoning ordinance is zoning. That's where we would run into the big exception for farming operation.
Thank you.
Wait, if you have a farming operation, it's got a farm on it, of your kid, then you're farming, you then ask for that variance.
They have to be part of gleaning income off of the property, being directly involved. Some indicators are the Schedule Fs that you file with the taxes, and directly working as a farm worker that's rooted in directly with the family.
Comments, questions from the commission?
You gonna do it?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Corey for,
Motion to recommend approval. Board of Supervisors. Zoning ordinance map amendment, rezone from agricultural A3 to AE on the parcel number 874704300003.
got a motion,
I'll second.
we have a second by Jeff. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same. Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And Dolph, I'll be calling.
Thank you.
One quick thing for the record, the Sergeant Bluff resolution is typically recorded as kind of a separate attachment. Basically, that resolution in the packet.
Yeah.
We'll need that at the time, so you'll want your attorney to bring the
The
original.
one that we got. Sorry.
Yes, the original, so that'll need to be recorded directly with the plat.
Go ahead, moving on, information discussion, Woodbury County Comprehensive Plan 2040 update.
Yes, and we touched on this a little bit. The comprehensive plan has been going on quite a bit. Our chair of the zoning commission, Chris Zelmerzant, does sit on the board to look at Simcoe is working directly with the county departments on this county development plan. So that comes down to what are the priorities for Woodbury County up and through 2040? What type of county do we want to be in terms of land use? So it goes right back again to the mapping. It goes down to the types of use. So the sky is the limit on that. So if you look at businesses or residential, quality of life, all of those aspects, retaining the farming lifestyle, all of those things are directly rooted in. What I did include as additional material there is kind of a handout that we were given by Simcoe. Simcoe is kind of going through this, looking at the county's priorities, and what's going to happen is Simcoe's going to have a proposal that they're going to bring to the zoning commission eventually. And the zoning commission and the board of supervisors are the ones directly responsible for looking at what the priorities are for the county over this set period of time. So this gets down into the nuts and bolts of where zoning districts will be by chance. What we had just talked about, the corridor there around Sergeant Bluff. Where we have to be careful, and Simcoe's been doing a pretty good job of looking at this for us, is cities, localities also have their own plans, in particular on how they want their cities to grow. And so you always want a plan that is compatible with the city priorities as well as the county priorities. And so when we look at that 2-mile barrier that we oftentimes consider when we do a subdivision plat, the whole goal is to try to stay on the same page. Since I've been here, I've never seen this happen where a minor subdivision happens. Let's just say hypothetically tonight, Sergeant Bluff took up this proposal and they voted no on it for some type of reason. They found that it may not fit with their priorities as a whole. Maybe they had an issue with density or lot sizes or something that directly is in their ordinance. Within the 2-mile range. We know in Woodbury County that Sioux City probably has the most robust ordinance when it comes to looking at that 2-mile range. They'll oftentimes place an agreement on there that states that if they start to abut you in terms of your property, you'll sign an agreement to voluntarily annex in when you start to be surrounded by city borders. And so these 2-mile territorial review processes are instituted in state code to make it easier in a sense for cities to plan out their priorities. A lot of times, unfortunately, we're sitting ducks in the county when it comes down to the barrier around. Of course, many of us would probably have ideas or goals or priorities when it stays in county land. But the whole goal is when you do a general plan is to try to get everybody on the same page so that there are no disputes or no surprises later on. If, for example, out in the Buchanan area and the Barker area, where kind of where the landfill is, in those areas, Sioux City would have a plan. We would have a plan. Are we looking generally at the same type of parcel there? So if we back it up with our map, and we're both kind of in agreement there, that means if something comes up for a rezone, the city can look at their criteria, we can look at our criteria, we can say, wow, it's in complement versus some type of disagreement. So the whole goal of planning is to lay out the steps to avoid the pitfalls. And so the other document that I laid out, Simcoe offered this to some of the stakeholders, and I just simply want to brief you all on. It's an implementation tool. So there's a list of kind of priorities there where they're asking people to kind of just pencil in ideas on what the priorities are when it comes to like farming or economics, development issues, support of businesses, or the development of residential. The residential really is kind of a big one because that's where we tend to see the houses develop within this particular proposal here. It's quite apparent that Sergeant Bluff is growing to the east in those areas based on actions like this tonight, that maybe someday those houses might actually be part of Sergeant Bluff, just like up north where Sioux City could possibly be moving out a bit further as we go along the line. I do want to point out, and this is kind of for our next agenda item, but it's covered. We've got this new website, and it was presented before the Board of Supervisors a few weeks ago with Neapolitan Labs. And what our department, the zoning, has done is we're trying our hardest to make information available on this website to reduce the number of questions as possible. And so when we get up here, we have these different categories, including the future land use map. We want that to be one click away for everybody so that they don't have to dig and find out kind of what the priorities are. And you'll notice right away that shows us what the future land use priorities are for Woodbury County. You notice the yellow right there is housing. That's basically where they consider housing. In the discussions with Simcoe, even the folks that we brought on at Simcoe even asked, and this may take expertise, Tom, I know you've been kind of around through some of the past processes where they kind of came to the idea. We're putting residential all along this corridor here up through Bronson. We've talked about kind of this whole area as being kind of a residential. It must have been definitely the priority back during the 2005 that we expand that way. The other expansion was the commercial, much more along the Highway 20 corridor. I think since I've been around, I think we based one rezone maybe a couple of years ago, maybe a couple. We've had a couple of rezones where we matched the map and said that's a commercial district, so that justifies it. But we all know that there's some really good farm ground along there on that Highway 20 corridor. So that is kind of the tug of war there. Good farm ground versus here's a development priority here. And so you'll notice that most of our county is ag, except for kind of around the fringes of the city where they would have their own priorities. I remember a few years back, I think it was maybe 2019, 2020, we had a request to do a general industrial zoning district kind of north of Correctionville. You might remember the individual had the trucking company. And we actually discussed the city's development plan as much as the county's there. And it kind of fit or it matched kind of both priorities there. But kind of when we get into these 2 mile zones, it's only essential that this map creates that conversation. And that's the key with these type of zoning maps. So to me, this is the centerpiece or the table where you have the elevator speech about where you can talk about the county priorities as it comes to land use. And you'll see that we're definitely an ag county for sure based on this, as well as the commercial around Sioux City. I know the efforts, putting an industrial area down here has been kind of a partnership in a lot of respects with Sioux City and putting our industrial based districts there. The key here is, depending on a future land use map, this could eventually, if we decide to move to a new zoning ordinance, this could be the basis of a blanket zoning districts later on in the future, where zoning commission, board of supervisors would consider a full county-wide rezone, which happened to a lot of these folks down here. As we know, the culture down here is farm ground, basically, in the general industrial district. And so farmers retain much of their rights on farming that in perpetuity until basically the farming ceases. And so zoning is a very long-term thing, of course, as you all know well. So that's pretty much all I got there. This is just a information item to brief you. Simcoe is still in their phases of working on the project to bring a proposal forward. And of course, zoning commission, there'll be public hearings, and there'll be, of course, a board of supervisor approval scenario when we get to that. And I'm thinking, depending on my talks with Simcoe, that this should be happening hopefully yet this calendar year. It's just a matter of sorting out what those priorities are for the county. And there will definitely be public input.
A way to get this. Not out there.
Yeah, I can make a note and get that to you. Yeah,
It's pretty small.
it is. Digital always helps. So. That's all I got.
Thanks, Dan, and I guess you touched on the next issue. On with the information discussion of the county website.
Yeah.
Anything more to add there? Or?
Yeah, I do. The Board of Supervisors gave me the honor to go through the selection process of working with a committee to locating a new vendor to run the county website. And so over the last, they did it relatively quick, actually, from September to about a January implementation date. Neapolitan Labs assisted the county with launching this website. And the whole idea of the website is to hopefully be a communication center so that we can inform the public as much as possible what's going on with all of our meetings, even at the zoning commission level, the board of adjustment level, to have the agendas and everything made freely available. And the interesting part is, and this is so neat, when 4:30 hits, sometimes it's 4:32, but whenever the auditor hits the record button on the YouTube, a bar comes up here and the bar says live board of supervisor meeting. And you can click on that and it broadcasts out the supervisor meeting and it links it into the live YouTube. So we're really hoping that that'll get the viewer numbers up on the YouTube channel, but it's interactive in that way. So we're been really excited about that. And when we come down here, the board meetings button is really centralized to the board of supervisors, what's going on with the supervisors. Typically, I think agenda items are due, if you're going to put something before the supervisors, typically on Thursdays, and then the board office kind of works through and announcing what the board agenda is on Fridays typically. So what the board office will do is they will populate this with the next board meeting, and you'll see the packet and the agenda here. So where the public can come down and download it. But another feature that we're really excited about is if you go down to the bottom here and you hit on notifications, this hasn't been implemented quite yet. I think it's probably going to start, I think, in March. But if you click on notifications, you can sign up for this with your email. Just simply put your name in, say what you want to be notified about, whether there's board of supervisors agendas, meeting minutes. So you click those. Then they have a plus here. There's a lot going on in Woodbury County. The supervisors serve as liaisons to many of these committees. So they're the head of various committees across the board. And you'll see that there's a lot to do in Woodbury County. And so whatever the general public might be interested in for their case, they can come in and kind of check mark it and then hit save here, or subscribe is the term they use. And then you will get email notifications on what is going to be happening before the Board of Supervisors or those respective committees there. Now, coordinating the county to get all the departments on the same page was quite a fun task, really, because I learned a lot more about the outside departments and everything, and was kind of exploring each of the departments. I basically did like I don't want to use the term forensic analysis on the old site, put together this report that went in and looked at everything when it comes to what they have hosted on the websites, whether it's the sheriff's department, et cetera. Then we turned it over to the website vendor and said, can you at least bring this stuff over? And then of course, make it better, enhance it. So we had the sheriff working on it. We had emergency services, emergency management, the county engineer. Everybody at some point came up to our office, coordinated meetings to get the website into basically speaking for one voice, in a sense where a Woodbury County resident knows that they can come here and learn more about what's happening with their county. So going to our department, what we've done is kind of looked at what is it that we do most often. Once in a while we'll get notices. So we have this new notice section. A couple hog confinement notices are there, and that's kind of available to the public to see that there's a couple up there. And of course, they can download the application materials. Typically, when we get a master matrix type of hog confinement, a master matrix goes before the Board of Supervisors, typically as the way we've been doing it in the past as an agenda item. But staff is tasked to working with the DNR, going out to the site and looking at separation distances and everything on the master matrix. But DNR ultimately decides whether a permit gets allowed or not. So the permitting is out of the county hands, other than looking at the matrix in a way to say, we agree with the permit or not agree with the permit. So it gives the supervisors some input on those, those applications. We also have a property search button here, which basically brings you up to Beacon. Right here is applications. We've tried to itemize our applications when you go down to building permit and put resources here that define the building permits, resources here that define floodplain, grading, conditional use, rezone, variance, then it goes on and on. One thing that I'm really excited about is our conditional use requirements, because what it does is you put this, click on this button here, and it gives them instructions on how they get an application to this board. And so you'll see kind of where it has the breakdown. You file it with our office, go through each of those steps, and here's the deciding criteria. And we even have this, the conditional use requested is authorized as a conditional use. So there's a link there to click on that. And if it pops up, you find out if a C is within the zoning district. And we use this now as an advising tool when somebody's coming in for an application. Another one that I'm excited about is, of course, we have the listing of ordinances. You'll find our zoning ordinance, subdivision ordinance, and of course the recent actions with the commercial wind ordinance out there, including when they adopted the 2,500 foot setback. It kind of explains that. Then of course we keep the development plan out there as well. It's linked on the main site too. Then we have land use and zoning map. This is a place for them to go to look at the current zoning map. This is different than the land use map. This is actually, for the most part, where the districts are, with the exception of if the commission and supervisors rezone. There's a little bit of an instruction here how to use Beacon to find your property, to find your zoning district. We've worked with the assessor on having them put the zoning district in the parcel report too. So that's kind of a nice feature. Sometimes the parcel report or the parcel misses the color sometimes when they do a split. And so we try to catch it and fix the map as soon as we can. Land use regulations. We created a handout that is a little bit more interactive, where we break land use down by various categories: industrial and institutional, transportation. And then we just go back down to, this is just kind of a redesign of the land use summary table. So you'll see things like commercial feedlots are okay in our ag districts. Go down further, you'll see all these things are okay in commercial. So it kind of gives somebody at least a nice way to print this off versus kind of printing in between the ordinance at times when those pages can get kind of confusing. Another thing that I'm kind of excited about is, of course, we've got Ragbri in here, and you can click on the C. The C will shoot you back to what a C is in terms of the conditional use, and let them know that they have to go through that respective process. So if we go back to the main page here, floodplain development, this is kind of the general elevation requirements, property search, if they can find their property in the floodplain, and a link to the flood ordinance with some of the requirements. We explain base flood elevation here. Then we offer resources, the map viewer. Then I do have the draft floodplain map viewer, so you can come in here and see what that parcel looks like in the future if it's adopted. So lots of links here. A lot of them are external to FEMA and various other governmental websites. Land division, never had this before. This is a new feature, which kind of explains what a minor subdivision is. It gives subdivision ordinance requirements. It tells you what a major subdivision is. A boundary adjustment, if somebody's just to go take do some deed work and change their property line, they're going to be ended up having a surveyor do a survey, get a new deed, and then you sit with two deeds and combine the deeds together. And that's in effect what a part of kind of a boundary adjustment is, which doesn't trigger subdivisions. Simple division is just splitting that corner out of the 40. And of course, if there's a major zoning violation of some sort, the auditor does have the power to force, it's very rare if it's even ever happened, force a replatting. So going down here, I'm excited about this link because before, well, that's the ordinance requirements directly for what's brought before the commission and the board of supervisors. So sort of that checklist that we embed into the packet is all based upon this.
Got a question.
Yes.
With the boundary adjustment, so that's an adjustment that an individual can make to either encompass more area or less without going through the subdivision process.
Yeah, so let's just say, for example, you're in a 40 with your neighbor and you made a deal to buy a piece of some sort. You can get a surveyor to create a legal description, create a new boundary, and have them deed it over to you. And it's all done in the deed. A survey creates a legal description. The legal description is put into the deed. And so we do have this property defined, and it's deeded over, let's say, to Tom Bryan. So that's recorded. And guess what? Zoning violation first, because there's one more action. Tom would have to deed that exactly in his name down to the initial on what your property is. And then if your identical deeds are the same abutting, you contact the county assessor and you say, I control both these parcels, please combine them. And then the assessor combine them, and it becomes a unified lot under the same tax statement. And so that's what construes a boundary adjustment. Okay, here's the checklist here. Minor subdivision process timeline. It's one of the many links under there. But this is another one I hand out when people email me. And so we've made it available here. Is another printout where they can kind of go through each step. If there's any floodplain, we want them to get the BFE from the DNR. We want them to talk to the city first if they're within that 2 mile, so that they can get on the same page with the city, get it into an acceptable format before we bring it over to the county. So the goal is to always have the city stuff settled. Yeah. So you'll see this is multiple page based upon that ordinance section that I showed you before. And kind of down at the bottom, there's helpful links to other departments. Subdivision, when somebody comes in for a subdivision, it starts a huge project. We're talking to Siouxland District Health, we're talking to Mark Dara, we're talking to the utilities, and all these things that kind of go into the report for you all in terms of the consideration on what can impact the property. So we're trying to be more informational when it comes to this so that the landowner can kind of know what they're getting themselves into if they desire to do any of these types of splits. Guide to county living. This has been Mark actually called me a few weeks ago. County living is very challenging, as you know, when you have premature thaws. The effects on the roads and everything. I know Mark is fielding a lot of phone calls with the mudding, the road and the ruts and everything popping up. And we all know that living out in the county, if you're a first-time homeowner or a buyer and you go out on a secondary road, it's not going to be at the height of service as you're going to be on a hard surface within Sioux City. And so we have this guide here that hopefully brings awareness to the public based on criteria about access to property. Utility services are much more different out in the county. The property as a whole, the requirements, land use requirements. We all know Mother Nature can play a huge role in lifestyle out in the county. And of course, the legacy of ag out there. And so this is just kind of a nice guide. I know Mark likes to share it with people as well. And he's even said to us, please, when you know somebody's getting a building permit, it's never been out in the county before, please hand them that so that they have an awareness of that life is very much different on a secondary road. Then, of course, permits on file. That's an Excel document that lists the most recent permits. The current development plan is linked directly from the site. So you'll see right here the 2005 plan for 2025. Our next one will be for 2040. So that's out there now available to the public. And that's what I dig into for the staff report, basically when I put out those criteria. Future land use map. And I did put an informational item out here on RAGBRAI because RAGBRAI is coming here. We're probably going to have lots of questions about what you can and cannot do based upon what was decided last fall to allow a temporary use if there's no alcohol and allow a conditional use process if there's alcohol to be served. So this, not the best connection now, but I assure you that link works. There it is. So this kind of breaks down that ordinance, shows where we put the temporary use, where we put the conditional use, and we don't really use the in our districts. So we kept them out of suburban residential and left it in the ag and the commercial land and everything. So this is kind of the informational hub when people call me. That's what we'll talk them through based on RAGBRAI. And of course, we have Zoning Commission Board of Adjustment linked here. So what we'd like to do from here on out when we email out agendas is have the agenda serviced out on the website. And we'll kind of put a link into the email. But if you have trouble with the email or anything, we're always going to have this out here where you can go to agenda and packet. And the agenda is always your first page. And of course, the packet is the whole document, basically. We'll have that out there for you. So that's our website.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Looks good.
Thank you.
All right, I guess we'll move on here to public comment on matters not on the agenda. I know we have somebody sitting in the audience that's been quiet. I was going to have him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Dan Fisher, one of the supervisors, District 2. So I'm going to sit in, listen and learn stuff. But I want to come.
Thank-
Other than David Joe, it's definitely top notch compared to a lot of guys. So enjoy all of it.
Thanks.
Thanks for showing up.
Yeah.
Service.
Okay, move on to commissioner comment or inquiry. Do we have anybody? Nothing from Lori or Jeff? I actually have I guess a little bit of a comment I'd like to make. I talked to Dan a little bit about it regarding the areas of the counties that are within the extraterritorial review that non-zone, or areas, counties that don't have zoning in that area, there was a law passed that the cities can't impart their annexation agreement conditional upon subdivisions or development. I guess I've had another comment directed towards me regarding, or question regarding that. Well, does that then gonna apply to the areas that are currently have zoning? And I guess, I think that's probably something that, I don't know if the courts will have to decide that, where that intention was meant. That's the best answer I could give them at the time. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
This would be kind of another one of those wait and see. Watching the legislature, I haven't seen anything. I know they're coming up to the funnel with their legislation coming up here pretty soon. But to answer that, it gets confusing in Iowa code because Iowa code has city zoning, county zoning, and subdivision. We don't put the subdivision regs into the zoning regs. So we're operating under two different criteria. And so a farmer, in a sense, can't argue about, I'm not doing a minor subdivision because I'm a farmer, because the ag exemption is rooted into the zoning side, the county zoning where it's recognized there. Going back to the subdivision regulations, extraterritorial review is directly enumerated into the subdivision ordinance. And what that does is it requires the city, whether it's a city council, whether they're more formalized, they have the zoning commission, they have the city council as a whole, the community under Iowa code has the right to that 2 mile, regardless through the specific subdivision regulations. So if you're triggering a split that does a subdivision, the city does have a voice. I think where Tom's going with this is if a county doesn't have an adopted zoning ordinance, or the county has asserted itself as regulating the unincorporated areas by way of zoning, cities in the past have had the ability to adopt by ordinance something that says we're going to exert authority over the 2 mile. So if you have any specific language you could share with me.
Yeah, I guess it's been so long ago that I've even, it was a law that was passed in those holes that didn't have county zoning. The cities, they still had the extraterritorial review, but they just couldn't force an annexation agreement upon that property owner for granting the right for a subdivision or whatever it may be. And that was the question directed to me. Well, then how does that apply to counties that have zoning? I said, currently, I don't know.
Well, we have zoning and Sioux City does that to us. If you look at, I think we had that rainbow edition last year near Lawton where they still make them sign it. So the either having zoning or not having zoning, they're going to exert their authority, and every city has the right to under it's either 354 or 3. I'd have to go back and dig through and get a specific number.
So like I said, I really couldn't give him a direct answer other than there's a battle there. It's probably a court decision to determine whether that's going to apply.
Yeah, and the Sioux City, and I fully cannot speak for the Sioux City, but they know we have a zoning ordinance. When people call the city and it's a county parcel, we hand everything off to each other. So they call, we say that's city jurisdiction, vice versa. And so I think for the most part around here, everybody tends to respect the jurisdiction because we have the authority over floodplain, building permits, splits, regular splits, everything of that nature as a whole. So Sioux City typically don't get involved in our building permit process. We would probably ask Sioux City for comment if somebody does a conditional use permit. The animal hospital last year, the Elk Creek, that basically sits on Morningside Avenue, and it's surrounded by Sioux City, yet it's a county parcel. Well, they had no concern about that. In other words, they didn't have a major comment or thing. So they're pretty good about deferring back to the county for that type of authority. But of course, subdivision is the opportunity to get this agreement signed. So that's where they would do that.
Anything else? No other comments? On staff update?
My staff update generally, really follows kind of where we were at with the information items and everything. You'll notice that, our minutes, I know we did not meet in January. We did, the Board of Supervisors received the, pipeline ordinance, information the next night. I'm trying to remember, November 28th, we held the big public hearing downstairs, and that went pretty well. And then I gave an information item update the next week, and then the next week I brought the report. Chris basically signed a summary that what happened at that meeting and everything. And we're just generally, I think, like with the rest of the state, watching what's going on. I see this, you may have seen in the newspaper, the legislature is looking at some sort of 90% threshold of voluntary agreements before eminent domain. So we just have to kind of watch and see what comes out of the Speaker of the House's office. But again, the concerns, many of the counties that don't have ordinances would be, in a sense, we have the conditional use infrastructure. I think that the public definitely learned a lot that night when it was kind of explained that it would go through zoning commission and it would go through Board of Adjustment under those respective duties of going through that criteria. And so based on where we're at of having an ordinance, we have some language in there that may have some regulatory authority, of course, but some of the other communities are looking at passing different things, but the issue with that is it can get very problematic when you're defining certain types. And I think one of the things that was mentioned at that meeting was the effect of the reverse setback and creating a corridor that could put some properties out of commission, in a sense, with setbacks. So I guess there's a lot of considerations that play a role in that. And when I go back and look, and I'd even have to defer to Tom because you were around in the creation of the 2005 or 2008 ordinance. What I've noticed in our ordinance, and I'll just pull this up for information purposes, we have a legacy when we exercise zoning to do the conditional use on the things that are more intense for the public. And this is something that I know that was explained. It's kind of nice that it comes up to that change. But if you look real carefully, anything that's utility-based, utility or transportation, communication, when we go down to pipelines, we got a conditional use permit in every single district. What that means is our zoning ordinance regulates that. And I know that was a part of our meeting there the other night was that it goes through the conditional use permit criteria. And then there's the whole basis of being able to maybe look at that and maybe be able to condition that. So I know I'm just kind of repeating back to you what you experienced there, but that's generally what we brought forward in terms of that. So
I guess I'd elaborate a little bit on that too. I've had several individuals that were at the meeting or that found out about the meeting after the fact. And the misconception that they had going into the meeting is we had no ability to regulate that. We were just gonna approve it and let it go through. Once they understood what the conditional use permit was for and how it could be used. And it would also not impact the current pipelines that were out there with reverse setbacks impacting people negatively. They felt actually really good that we didn't adopt the ordinance that would impact them negatively and really not have any more power or control than we do with the conditional use permit. And that's why they felt good after they understood that.
and this would be a mega project because when we do conditional uses, we look by parcel. So when this permit application comes in, staff, the commission, Board of Adjustment are going to be very busy if the application comes in because it's scrutinizing the neighborhoods. It's scrutinizing the application. So there's definitely a lot to that as a whole.
And it will be a lot of work, but the other thing is it does give you that flexibility to do things differently throughout the corridor that maybe are suited pretty differently. So versus a standalone ordinance or an ordinance drafted might apply broadly to every parcel, some negatively, some positive.
So again, I know you all know this well because you've been involved with many of these projects that are conditional use, but in general, it gives the flexibility. We know that times the federal government does preempt us on things. That's what we're watching, that we're still monitoring the federal lawsuits in the other counties as it pertains to the argument is, can a local government regulate the safety or even the design of the respective pipelines? And so that's where litigation could come out of in terms of the idea is the Iowa Utilities Board grant that permit, or where can you exert local authority? Well, those other counties, a couple of them, I think Story, they're basically, it's kind of going to be a court decision, at least at some point there. So it's just kind of watching and monitoring that is kind of a prudent thing to kind of look at as well. We all know what happens to us when the federal government gets involved, though. Telecommunication towers. We have a conditional use permit there, but we're also told we're not allowed to ask certain things. We can't ask about communication or the effect on health, those type of things, wavelength design. All of those things are an Iowa Code 8C as well as an FCC documentation.
That's really, you can't require them to cohabitate.
Yeah, they even got into that because that used to be part of our ordinance where we would say, oh, there's a tower within 2.5 miles. Why don't you think about putting your antenna over there? Well, that was thrown out and we were preempted. And so when you look at all of these things by case, a lot of times the zoning ordinance doesn't always tell the big picture there. If somebody were to put a rail line in, well, there's going to be a lot of regulation there too. We would have to learn more about if one of these rail companies decided to create a magical new route through Woodbury County. We would have to learn what we can and cannot do in respect to those items. But it's fascinating. We even have police stations as conditional use, fire stations. And the nice part about a conditional use is it creates scrutiny, it creates conversation. It alerts the public, lets the public be involved, whether it's enumerated as 1,000 feet, whether it's enumerated as 500 feet notification. Our telecommunication tower still says 1 mile. So that public notice gets, but a 1 mile notification when we've done those. So, but that's pretty much all I have. I just want to let you know that, of course, formally that the supervisors received the report that came out of the zoning commission.
Thanks, Dan. I guess moving on to. I second. Okay. So we have a motion by Jeff, second by Corey to adjourn. All those in favor
All
say
day to
aye.
say that. All day to say that.
Aye. All those opposed. None.